Bill Maher on Trump vs. Biden, the state of the media, and fighting with his own audience. Bill Maher's audience has changed considerably over the years. Bill Maher, he insists, has not. The comedian and commentator, who revels in challenging the sensibilities of his own viewers, is in the thick of the 22nd season of Real Time, the late-night show he hosts on HBO. In recent years he added to his plate a video podcast called Club Random, which features rollicking and wondering conversations with various celebrities that touch on everything from esoteric rock history to the hazardous effects of fungus, often with a drink and a joint in hand. The show, born in the Rogan era of the Holocene epoch, has been a success, building up more than 500,000 subscribers on YouTube and millions of views for individual episodes. Maher's nearly 2-hour chat with Jordan Peterson has been watched 4.6 million times. Maher also has a book coming out this year inspired by his real-time editorials. What this comedian said will shock you. Maher sat down for an in-depth conversation with Mediaite at the Club Random studio in Los Angeles for the premiere episode of Press Club, our new podcast. He discussed his career, which he began as a startup comic appearing on Johnny Carson, and involved more than a few years of toil before his big break as host of Politically Incorrect on Comedy Central and then ABC. That show was cancelled after Maher made a politically incorrect remark that offended Ari Fleischer and a few others. Soon after, Maher would launch Real Time, a show he's hosted for the last 2 decades. At some point in the last few years, Maher says, some of his audience became overly sensitive to his commentary, which he maintains hasn't changed ideologically. Fortunately for Maher, self-selection ensured the groaners, as he calls them, no longer populate his live studio audience. In a wide-ranging interview, Maher discussed fighting with his audience, his career, the state of the media industry, why he no longer watches cable news, the 2024 race, whether President Joe Biden should drop out, the continued appeal of President Donald Trump, and the year he did cocaine. Read a transcript of the conversation below, edited for length and clarity. Aidan McLaughlin: how are you doing, Bill? Bill Maher: good. How are you doing? I'm doing good. Thanks for coming on the show. We're at Club Random. Yes. I'm reading it behind your head. Club Random VIP Lounge. Best friends only. Drink what you want, say what you like. I got a drink here. I got some water too. I'm all stocked up. The show is great, it's a couple hours with these guests. You don't write questions for this, do you? Do I look like I write questions? The only reason to do a podcast when you already have a successful television show is to do something completely different. And in fact, I had to promise to do something very different. But it was okay because I wanted to. And completely different includes zero preparation. I prepare my ass off for Real Time. That's my real job, and I'll always have to believe and do think it's a better product because I work on it all week. It has written comedy bits and editorial at the end. I have a book coming out in June, it's a collection of these editorials. It's really a polished product. This is the opposite. And it's the difference between the Beatles and the Stones. You know, one is like studio perfection and the other is raw, and you can like them both. But no, I don't have time and I don't have desire. I just like to sit here and get high with people just the way I always did before it was a television show. All I did differently was I built the cameras into the walls, and so it's just me and the person here. And I think there is a level of naturalness that I've never seen anywhere else, if I do say so myself. And I'm guessing you don't smoke or drink before Real Time either. That requires a little bit more discipline. Correct. And you have a senator on and a governor or something. And also people are watching it in a different setting. It's a catch-up show. Here's what happened that I think is important this week in the news that you should know about. I take that job seriously, that people watch it. Oh, I don't have time to follow the news, I'm going to let Bill fill me in. This show, I'm always saying, what are we talking about? That would never happen on Real Time. I got to know what we're talking about. I want to go back to the start of your career. I read your novel True Story. Well, great. Thank you. It made me want to ask how you made the jump from being a stand-up comic, appearing on Johnny Carson, to hosting what was in many ways a politics show, Politically Incorrect. How did that come about? Too slowly. I should have been aiming at that. But when I started in comedy, we all wanted to get on a sitcom. That was sort of like the template. We saw Robin Williams do that and Roseanne, people who took their comic persona or just got on a show. And that is exactly what happened. I came out and I did sitcoms, but I always did think I was better at this. My hero growing up was Johnny Carson, who wasn't a sitcom actor. And I was always not really down with what the essence of acting is, which is the opposite of what being a comedian is. Comedian is being your truest self. This interview I just did with Sheryl Crow, that's the truest I can get with the person. And because it is, there's no difference from if we weren't on. I certainly wouldn't have been different. I don't think Sheryl Crow would have been different. That's different than an actor who's it's all camouflage. There's a friction there. Some comics are great actors. You can pull it off and you can do both, but I think I knew what I was destined for, and it wasn't playing the third lead on Bringing Up Chunky. Although I was good in it. You also talk in the book about how crowded the comedy space was, which reminded me in a lot of ways of the podcast world. Very good analogy. You're right. Everyone has a fucking podcast now. Everyone used to be a stand-up comic. I wrote one novel in my life. I'm never going to write another one. It took too much out of me. But I did make it funny on every page, I think. I really labored over it. I was at a time in my career when I had the time to do it because no one was asking me to do anything. It was between the talk show and the sitcoms that I did that. But it's about that period of my life that is usually the time when if somebody is going to write a great novel, it's probably about that time in your life when you're starting out. When you think about so many of the great novelists and what they did. Catch 22. Yeah, it's when he's in the army, he's 22 years old. It's the formative time in your life when you're learning about life, blah, blah, blah. It's interesting. You're young. Romance. Then they write novels the rest of their lives that are kind of somehow rewriting the same novel. So I just quit at the one. I also heard you once say that you banged it out thanks to a diet of cocaine and cigarettes.